Turns tonight, but first let's just recap the tragic story that sparked this debate.
What would you say to those parents who still refuse to vaccinate their children?
You're not only putting your child at risk, you're putting every child out there at risk. Dana!
Dana who?
Dana Elizabeth McCaffrey.
Oh, she's beautiful.
1 minute she's this beautiful little girl. And then, you know, she looked like someone had strangled her.
Dana McCaffrey's life was too short. She was born perfectly healthy, but at 4 weeks old, Dana caught whooping cough.
It is really difficult to watch any baby go through that. I think the risk-benefit for vaccination is firmly established. The benefit far outweighs the risk.
We have a medical community that's saying if you get measles, if you get whooping cough, you're going to die from it. Well, where is the information from that?
It's just not right. It's just not right that my little girl is in a grave. I didn't want to be the vaccination crusader, you know.
Nor is it our responsibility. It's the responsibility of governments, and they need to take charge.
I just want my girl.
Yeah, the McCaffrey family is with us tonight, and we'll come to them shortly. We're also joined by Professor Peter McIntyre from the National Immunisation and Surveillance Centre and anti-vaccine GP Dr Giselle Cook. Dr Cook, you object to me calling you an anti-vaccine GP?
Absolutely. That's in no way an accurate representation of what my advice is to my patients.
Despite not having given a vaccination for
my
18 years.
That I'm pro-choice.
But you haven't given a vaccination for 18 years.
That's my personal choice in my practice because I do not provide risky medical interventions to my patients, and I consider vaccination as one of those.
Do you think it's anti-vaccine, Professor?
Well, I think it's Russian roulette, really, because, sure, the number of children these days with good medical care who actually tragically die from these diseases, largely because vaccination has diminished them so much, is very small, but you don't know whether your child will be one of those unlucky ones. There's nothing in terms of fantastic diet, great lifestyle that's going to protect them. Only vaccination will protect them, and sure, there may be no problem, but it's Russian roulette as to whether your child's the one that dies or not.
The medical profession always talks about risks.
Exactly.
What are the risks? That's what parents really... That's why we're here today, because parents aren't sure about these risks.
Well, one of the real dilemmas, I suppose, for vaccination is that it's been a victim of its own success. So vaccines have been so successful at turning diseases that people were really fearful of, like polio in the 1950s, into things which are in the history books, that we're not reminded about why it's so important. And we see people who come to our country as refugees or immigrants from countries that aren't as lucky as our own. They can't wait to get vaccinated because they realise the value of it from what they've seen in their own country. But we don't see that because things are going so well.
Ms. Dory, you want to say something, obviously?
In 1970, when the measles vaccine was introduced in Australia, there were 3 deaths in the country from measles. Right now, the government says there are 12 deaths a year. So I don't see that there's been any benefit from the measles vaccine.
You also did say that you were going to bring along a case of autism and also another case of a child suffering fit disorders. Neither of those cases eventuated, Ms. Dory.
Well, actually, I gave those numbers to Gabrielle, but she has not contacted the parents, one of them in Melbourne and another one in Sydney.
No, she has contacted them, and they didn't want to speak out. And I think this is one of the problems from your network, that you often do say that there are these cases, but they never really eventuate.
Well, we've reported all of our reactions to the government. Since 2002, we were entitled to.
And yet the government says keep vaccinating.
Well, the government says keep vaccinating, but we're looking at the government's own information.
Well, there's a couple of inaccuracies about what Meryl's just said. So, firstly, it's completely untrue that there are deaths from measles. There hasn't been a death from measles in over 20 years, and yet if we look back in the 1950s, before measles vaccination, there were 20 or 30 deaths a year. So I'm not sure where Meryl's getting her information from, but there have been no deaths from measles in Australia for a long time. In fact, one of the reasons there was a kind of tail of deaths was there's this very nasty thing called SSPE, which is basically brain damage you get from measles that happens about 20 years after you get measles. You don't get that from the vaccine. You do get it from measles, and so there will still be deaths recorded as measles 20 years later, but actual deaths from measles itself, no.
We have twins in the studio. This is Levi.
Yeah.
And Lakem, his twin brother, has just left us.
Oh, no, sorry. No, Lakem.
This is Lakem. This is Lakem. Now, Lakem has not been immunised at all.
No.
Just behind Lakem, we have a mother with a 15-week-old who is just recovering from whooping cough, who has been vaccinated. Let me ask you, if I may, Benjamin's mother, do you worry that you're now in a studio 2 seats away from a little boy that hasn't been vaccinated?
I do. Because after seeing what he went through with whooping cough and how awful it is, it does worry me. I worry about him going to childcare centres and then back to school, worrying what he can catch from children who haven't been vaccinated. And I don't mean any offence against this mother, that's her choice, and against her beautiful boy, but it's my first gut reaction is to think I don't want him near them.
And Lakem's mum, would you reply, please?
I don't think I know enough to comment. I mean, I've researched as much as I've been able to after having them, and I've decided not to. But I think it's...
But not knowing enough. Is that good enough?
No, well, I think it's personal choice, and I think fair enough, that's great. But personally, I've chosen not to.
I just want to go quickly, if I may, to Tony and David McCaffrey. Now, they weren't very comfortable about coming here tonight because after our story last week, they were inundated with hate mail.